Welcome to the Cup of Linux Lounge. I am Lord Shadowwing, a member of the Cup of Linux community. Open source software has risen to great prominence. Free and open source software is software whose licenses give the users the freedom to run the application for any purpose, to study and modify the software, and to redistribute copies of either the original or a modified version of the program without having to pay royalties to the previous developers. On today's show, we have Brian, Linux Book Pro, Matthew Moore, and here is our king of Linux lunacy, Spatry.
That's right, I'm going insane and I'm taking you all with me. Welcome one and all to cupoflinux.com. This is a great place to learn about using Linux and interacting with the community. Here you can ask your questions, share your experience with others, or enjoy a few laughs on the forums, chat room, or voice conversation on Mumble. Tonight is our second Cup of Linux Lounge podcast, and we are going to be discussing the Linux alternative. We will highlight the benefits of using free and open source software and free alternatives to Windows software you may have come to rely on. Before we get started, I would like to say hello to our panel of guests. We'll start off with you. Hi, Brian. You have a YouTube show, and you're also doing a lot of things in the community here. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've actually had my YouTube channel for a while. I think I started up probably back in 2008. Life kind of got in the way over the past couple of years, and I hadn't uploaded in a while, but about 4 months ago I started back up again, actually kind of doing a lot of the same thing you do, Spat, with Linux reviews and some how-tos. I've also done a couple things on Android on there, but I just enjoy learning new things myself, and I hope if anybody watches one of my videos that they're able to learn something and it helps them in some way.
All right, and we also have Linux Book Pro on the show here. He has a blog, and he also has a presence on YouTube. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I started using Linux back in 2008 as a way to install WordPress locally on my system, and Linux was the easiest way to go. On my YouTube channel, I tend to stick to distro reviews and the occasional WordPress video.
Awesome stuff indeed. And then, of course, we have Lord Shadowwing, who did that wonderful intro. Hey, how you doing?
Pretty decent. I've been using Linux for the past 6 months straight. I started actually looking into it really when Windows 8 came out. I did actually try it, and in my experience, it is the worst operating system I have ever used. Around my area, I've actually helped at least 6 people get into Linux full time now. There's one guy I helped. I used to date his daughter, and I got him and her using Linux about 6 months ago, so they started around the same time I did, and anytime they have any issues, they give me a call.
Well, I don't think you're going to get any argument from Matthew here on Windows 8. At least when you watch some of his reviews, they got to make you laugh when he reviews Windows 8. He also has a show on YouTube, plus he's got 3 Linux distros out there. He's got his own Manjaro respin, an Ubuntu respin, and a Xubuntu respin. How you doing, Matthew?
I'm doing pretty good.
All right, now this is a topic I've never covered on any of my shows in the past in great detail, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why I didn't think of this before. So thanks to the Cup of Linux community for suggesting the show idea. So let's get down to it. My first question to my guests on the panel is, what are the benefits of using free and open source software? Why do you use it, and why should you care? And let's go ahead and start off with you, Matthew.
Well, the benefits are it's free and open source, and I use it because it's free and open source. Yeah. But no, it's...
Gee, I'm so glad I asked you that question, Matthew.
No, it's all about freedom and the ability to choose to use what you want to use, and also the ability to get your computer to work for you rather than you working for your computer. When you download a piece of free and open source software, you have control over it, not some corporations. So you can pretty much make your computer have the workflow and feel to it that you want it to have. And that's why I enjoy it.
All right. And what's your take on that, Lord Shadowwing?
Hey, you can just shorten it to Shadow. I use Linux mainly because it allows me to use older hardware without resorting to older software like Windows 98 and Windows 2000 and such like that. The other reason is security. You don't have to deal with viruses. You don't have to deal with the spyware. You generally don't have to deal with the NSA. Generally, with using open source software.
How about you, Linux Book Pro?
I'll be honest, I started using it because I'm cheap.
Hey, what can I say? You know, that is as good of a reason as any. Expand on that a little bit, though.
Well, I mean, I used to use Photoshop all the time, and having to upgrade to the latest version every year would set me back $1,000 to get the entire Adobe suite. And on top of that, I'd have to upgrade my my laptop or my desktop every couple years, much more frequently, to keep up with the software.
You know, you made some good points, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Brian, what's your take?
Well, I can pretty much agree with all of the reasons the rest of the panel have stated. And I'd also, and to expand on the security piece a little bit, when you use a piece of open source software, you have the assurance, or at least the relative assurance, that because that code is open, someone who knows what they're doing and has looked at that, has inspected that code, and there's not going to be any nasty surprises in there. There's not going to be any backdoors. There's not going to be any spyware, because if it's in there, someone is going to find it, and that software will not last long in the user repository or in the PPA, and it certainly won't be in a major distro repository. So, there's that piece of it.
Okay, and I have to agree with all of those. The total cost of ownership is lower. If a security flaw is found, the community is going to come in and fix it. And the thing is, if I find a great piece of software, I can burn it to a disk and give it to one of my friends and not worry about breaking some laws. The software giants want you to believe that sharing is wrong. Now, weren't we taught as children that we should share our toys with other kids? With free and open source software, we have broken the chains of corporate greed. We support the software developers who create the applications we enjoy. We change the software to get it to function how we want. And a great example of this is my website here at cupoflinux.com. It's using technologies such as simple machine forums, PHP free chat, TikiWiki, and a smidgen of HTML5. And I was able to modify all of these to get them to perform to my liking, and that is at the very heart of the matter here. We're not restricted to certain hardware for the software like Apple does with OS X. We are not locked into Microsoft's walled garden. And it seems like many software companies are creating new and what I would define as evil ways to force dependency on their products. How do you see that, Matthew?
Well, I think there's two sides to that. There is the strong arming users into using their products, but for example, in Apple's case, they lock it down so they can deliver that user experience that people want. And in order to deliver that experience, they have to control it. Well, because quite frankly, the average user doesn't have the knowledge or the skill to be able to do that for themselves. But you are right. That can easily be abused, and some companies and software manufacturers do that intentionally. So mostly just to make money off of you. So it can go either way.
Absolutely. And forcing you to have to upgrade and that sort of thing. This was just discussed earlier. We're going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Shadow this time. What is your take on that?
Oh, it's all this proprietary stuff. I'm kind of agreeing with, wow, my brain just farted. I can't remember the name of the guy who started the Free Software Foundation, but I kind of agree with him with the, Stallman. I kind of agree with him with the open source and the freedom software. I'm thinking about going to just pure Debian and trying to stay away from as many non-free blobs as I can, because all these non-free blobs and software tend to snoop on you and allow the NSA and all that access to your system with hidden backdoors with this non-free software.
Linux Book Pro, what's your opinion?
Well, I take a pragmatic approach. I usually look at what problems I want to solve. For instance, recording video, recording screencasts, transferring video from one format to the other. It's just easier to do that within Linux, and a lot of that is because the free software is capable of getting past DRM when necessary. Sometimes you actually own the content that you're trying to translate from one file format to the other, and DRM just gets in the way.
Absolutely, and I couldn't have put that better myself. Your take on that, Brian?
Well, for me, it kind of comes down to flexibility. You get a greater degree of flexibility with free and open source software than you do with proprietary software. You know, for example, Microsoft Office document formats, they are not an open format, but they have become the de facto format for document exchange, at least in the United States. It may be different in other parts of the world. But, you know, with software suites like AbiWord, LibreOffice, that can those have been adopted to actually handle those proprietary formats. So you still have the flexibility to work in an environment where other people might be using proprietary software, but you can still collaborate and you can still work with them cross-platform. And you get that from open source, and you don't necessarily get that flexibility with proprietary.
And so that's the very heart of the matter here. Our focus today is breaking the chains, liberating yourselves from corporate greed, and still being able to get your work done with free software alternatives. So yesterday I had a discussion because there are so many software alternatives available, and I'm actually referring to alternative to .NET for many of the examples that we're going to be covering in the show here today. But I went and discussed with the community members some of the more popular software that tends to be holding people back from switching over to Linux, these programs and that sort of thing. So I'm going to be referring to this site quite a bit, and I will have a link in the description for those of you who are listening to us on YouTube, and for those of you who are watching this video streaming from my link on cupoflinux.com. But the number one application that was mentioned was Microsoft Office. Okay, what alternatives do you know of, Matthew, for Microsoft Office?
Well, there's LibreOffice, of course. There's also OpenOffice. You have AbiWord, Genumeric. There are a few choices, but the problem is support, because a lot of corporations don't support those kinds of software. So you do end up sometimes getting fonts and things not quite matching up right. But, I think if more people start going down that route, that would improve.
All right. How about you, Shadow? Do you use any Office software, and do you have any recommendations in particular?
Personally, I use LibreOffice. Since Microsoft opened up their TrueType fonts, you can install those fonts in your Linux system, and you can have all the proper fonting that is used in Microsoft Office.
And Linux Book Pro was telling me earlier he does a lot of work in WordPress and that sort of thing. But when you're creating content to import into WordPress, are you using any software alternatives to Microsoft Office to bring in content? And if so, what are those applications you're using?
Well, I do my text editing in LibreWriter, and as far as my actual HTML editing, I do that in Bluefish or gedit.
Okay, and how about you, Brian?
Pretty much a LibreOffice user here. I do have a computer that I do dual boot to Windows 7. Sometimes it does have Office installed on it, but anytime I need to transfer files between the two computers, LibreOffice handles DocX format just fine, and I don't have any issues.
And the nice thing about the alternative to .NET website is that not only are they showing you options for alternatives, because in pre-show discussion, Matthew was stating that he was looking for alternatives to Microsoft Office that he could run in Windows, for instance, because he uses Windows, Mac, he uses a little bit of everything. So let me give you a rundown of some of the ideas that you have. LibreOffice was mentioned. Apache OpenOffice is another option. Nobody mentioned Kingsoft. I'm starting to see the Kingsoft Office suite shipping with Linux distributions. There's Lotus Symphony, Calligra Suite, SoftMaker Office. I'm actually running that on Android, and I think it's a great little tool there. Euro Office, and then I also tried the Think Free Office as well on my Android, and then there are many, many, many other options there. Okay, well, now some of you may edit your own graphics. I know you do, Matthew, and another thing that was brought up was Photoshop. Now, and when you created your spin, you gave a few options to people who were, who are transitioning over to Linux, who need a photo editing package. Tell us a little bit of some of those packages that you included on your distros.
Well, in my distros, I pretty much targeted the new users, people that are leaving XP, people that are coming from Windows, what kind of software do they need? So I put the GIMP in there, the GNU image manipulation program, which is a good alternative to Photoshop. Not quite as capable as Photoshop, but I think most people could get by with it just fine. I also put Pinta in there, which is a good alternative to maybe Macromedia Fireworks or MS Paint. So there are a couple of options there. And like I said, a lot of people look at some of these open source alternatives as not being quite as capable as their proprietary counterpart. But the way I see it, most people would probably get the functionality they need out of this stuff.
How's your take on that, Shadow?
Oh, with graphics editing, I generally use GIMP. There's a few other software that I use, but I can't remember them off the top of my head because I don't have them currently installed on my Mint box. But GIMP is generally what I use for graphics editing.
How about you, Linux Book?
Well, I use GIMP as well. I tend to go in there and I change the keystroke combinations to match Photoshop or Fireworks.
Isn't that something? So now I understand there is also a variant of the GIMP called GIMP Shop, and I don't know if any of you have ever tried that, but it's supposed to make the workflow parallel to what you can do with Photoshop. Have any of you tried that one?
Never heard of it.
Okay, and what do you use for graphics, Brian?
I don't do a lot of graphics editing myself, and I have never used Photoshop, so I guess I wouldn't even know what I was missing. But when I do it, I use the GIMP.
Okay, and I've got to hand kudos to everybody here on the panel. For those of you who are using the GIMP, congratulations to you for using it, because you know what, guys? I can do all this fancy graphics editing on my website, but I still cannot wrap my head around the GIMP. I'm using Wine. And I'm running an old piece of Macromedia software, Fireworks 8, which I doubt would even run properly on Windows 8 nowadays. I know when I was running Windows 7, I couldn't install Macromedia Dreamweaver 8, but all of these applications run beautifully under Wine. And that is also another option for those of you switching over to free and open source software. You have these old applications collecting dust on your shelves. You can try running these applications in Wine and getting them running. Okay, another issue that was brought up was video editing, specifically either using Premiere or Sony Vegas Pro. We're going to go ahead and hand the mic over to you, Matthew. What programs are you using for editing video on using free and open source software?
Well, Kdenlive is what I use most of the time, but one of the main issues that I have with that is there is no Windows alternative to it, and that's kind of annoying for me since I do use both platforms. But I would say Kdenlive is pretty close to Sony Vegas Pro. I mean, as close as it can be for a free alternative. And it's extremely capable, a lot more than anyone would probably expect out of a free software suite. You could do chroma keying with it. You could, split audio tracks, add all kinds of effects. I don't know if a movie studio would use it, but it's pretty sufficient for just about any of the average users out there.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've cranked out a lot of really nice professional looking video out of that software. Shadowwing, do you do any video editing?
I don't, but if I did, I'd use Kdenlive.
How about you, Linux Book?
I tend to use OpenShot, but that's only for cuts. Most of the time I'm using FFmpeg or LibAV.
Awesome stuff. Glad you brought those up, because FFmpeg, that does an excellent job for screen capturing. You can also use LibAV for doing screen capturing as well, and those are very powerful command line tools. How about you, Brian?
I typically use Kazam for screen capturing and Kdenlive for editing and rendering.
And get this, The one thing that really isn't the strongest point of Kdenlive Live is its rendering options, because, sure, you can render in H.264, but YouTube likes to complain when you upload those videos. So one thing that I do is I use OpenShot and Kdenlive Live. I'll generate a project in Kdenlive Live, and then I will take that project and save it, and then I can open it in OpenShot and render it out to YouTube, and it gives me the perfect rendering format and nice file size, I will admit, too. Now, some other options for those of you who are using proprietary software and you want to try out some Linux video editors, there is OpenShot, Lightworks, and that's also available on Windows, although the workflow is a little bit, it takes a little bit of work. VLC, Videolan, has a movie creator. It's really not all that great. It's still in its infancy, but the thing is, I see a lot of potential coming for this. You also have PTV. You also have Cinelera, which will let you do some video type work that's similar to what you would come to expect with After Effects, but the learning curve is quite steep for that program. There's also Jacasha and Lives, and then plenty of other little options that are thrown in there as well. Okay, and this one is just for me personally, because when I switched to free and open source software, I was looking for alternatives to Flash, because I am a Flash developer. And believe it or not, I just couldn't find any really good examples. They have some listings here for at alternative2.net, but none of them will output to the Swift format. Some will give you the options for embedding with HTML5 using iframes, or you can convert to video, which you can embed into your website. Now, the nice thing is Google Swifty is a service online that I can take my Flash 8 animations and then convert them into HTML5 and then iframe them into my site. Because of the type of coding and scripting that is used, it uses ActionScript 2, and they haven't quite worked out ActionScript 3. This has actually breathed new life into my old Flash 8 software, and now I'm going to get even more years of use out of it. And all I had to do was just simply adapt my Flash animation and stuff. And I can even have buttons that, navigate to different pages and stuff. So I can still give the end user the full experience without having to, without having to purchase new software. I can keep my old software that I paid for years ago. But some good alternatives to Flash that are available out there are Stencil. There's Synfig, which you can use for creating cartoon animation. There's Scratch, another program called Polycode, Enigma, and Sencha Animator. And some of these applications also have Windows counterparts, and Sencha Animator actually does CSS3 animations. You should check out the website for that. It's awesome stuff. Okay, another one that was brought up was digital audio, such as FL Studio or Cakewalk, programs like that. And our biggest contender right now is Ardour. Matthew, what are you using for audio editing presently?
I'm using Linux Multimedia Studio in combination with Audacity. That's usually what I run my stuff through.
Now, Linux Multimedia Studio, for those of you who do not know, is Linux's answer to Fruity Loops or FL Studio Pro. It has a similar workflow. You can use MIDI with it. And if you use Vestige, you can import any of your paid VST plugins into the software and use it and get some pretty cool effects out of that. Shadow, do you use anything for audio editing?
I used to use Ardour, but I haven't done any audio editing in quite a while.
How about you, Linux Book?
I use Audacity.
Amen to that. I love Audacity. Very powerful software. How about you, Brian?
I don't really do audio editing.
Okay. You basically just film and then print and then upload to YouTube. But your options here, as mentioned, there's the Linux Multimedia Studio. Hydrogen is a drum machine program. I've played with this myself. I like it. It's pretty fun. Rose Garden is a well-rounded audio and MIDI sequencer and score editor. You have Q Tractor. You have Linux Sampler. And then there are even some really cool programs for guitarists hobbyists like myself, like Rack, which is a real-time guitar effects processor, and I love that program. It uses Jack, which is a low latency sound server, and you can get some really cool things going on with that. Okay, let's open up a can of worms. Another big thing that's preventing people from switching over to Linux is games. And we've talked about this before, so we're just going to keep it brief. We'll start off with you, Matthew. What have you done in terms of gaming when switching over to free and open source software?
Well, I'm not a big gamer, but usually on Linux, I like, Super Tux Kart, El Breakout 2, just some of the casual games just to pass the time, and they work fine for me. But unfortunately, we don't really see a lot of high-end AAA titles on the platform just yet, but we do have Steam, and it's evolving rather quickly, so that could change in the very near future.
Oh, absolutely. I'm loving all of the new titles that are coming in, and now with the advent of Steam OS, they've released a second beta. And I assume they're going to be releasing a final version at some point soon. They've got to be releasing a AAA title to go with that. Otherwise, how are they going to be selling those Steam boxes? Shadow, how is your gaming, or what do you do in terms of gaming, if at all?
I do not game on my laptop. If I game, I'm going to be gaming on my Xbox 360.
Okay, how about you, Linux Book Pro?
I stick to Steam, so whatever that they have and whatever runs on my laptop, I just use that.
How about you, Brian?
I like to blast aliens away in Alien Arena.
There you go. And pretty much, you know what, guys? I still have my old favorite games, my old software that's sitting on the shelf. A lot of those old games will run fine in Wine. And Wine, it just helps bridge that gap for many people who are, who aren't ready to make that full plunge. Unfortunately, brand new games, some of them are not going to work very well. But the good news is, Steam is working with the communities to not only get us better drivers, but now games are starting to get a port. But another thing is, if a program that you purchased uses OpenGL, odds are you might be able to get that working under Wine. But there are a lot of great options that are available for gaming. More and more games are being brought into the ecosystem. But the general consensus is, and especially from everybody that's here on the panel, I mean, most people who are running Linux really aren't avid gamers. I mean, some will play a casual game to, pass the time. But I don't even find myself playing games as much because I'm having so much more fun creating cool stuff and that sort of thing. Okay, guys, another one that was mentioned was burning disks. What is a good replacement for Nero? We'll start with you, Matthew. What are you using to burn your disks?
Well, I think K3B is probably the best there is on Linux, at least out of the ones that I've used. It never fails. It's quick. It doesn't make coffee coasters out of CDs. I've never had a problem with it. You can also use it to rip DVDs as well and even create them. So it is a very powerful piece of software.
Absolutely. K3B, I mean, you can, DVD rip, CD rip, you can rip everything. It is a full-featured piece of software, but the thing is, I think you have to add some additional dependencies to get those functions. Shadow, what are you burning your disks with?
Mostly lately it's been XFburn, but K3DB is my go-to burning software if I can get it on my distro.
How about you, Linux Book Pro?
I ditched to optical media a while ago, and I'm just using USB stick for everything.
So it's DD from the terminal for you. How's that? How about you, Brian?
I don't know why you hate on Brasero so much. Brasero works just fine for me.
Well, the thing is, this was when I was running Pinguy OS, the 1104 edition. For some reason, 1 out of 3 disks would be a reject when I was running Brasero at the time, and I don't know, it just kind of stuck with me that because the first impression is always going to be the lasting impression, and Brasero may have actually improved over time. But one thing I can't stress enough, though, is when you're burning these disks, and it may not be the software itself, it could be the media. You know how things are mass-produced nowadays, and they got these rated at 24x DVD burns and all this other stuff. I don't buy it one bit. If I'm going to burn a Linux distro to a DVD, I'm burning that sucker at 2x, because I want to make sure that I'm getting a good slow burn, so I don't have a corrupt image on my hand. But some alternatives are that was mentioned: Brasero, XF Burn, Sound Juicer, and Gnome Baker as some options for you. I use XF Burn myself, but I found myself nodding my head when Linux Book Pro was telling me that he ditched the CD medium and decided to opt for the little USB sticks. I switched to SD cards. I have a little SD card reader on my laptop, and so I find myself, just using DD to transfer those images, and then I even have a converter that converts them to USB so I can boot my system. So those are very good options as well. Okay, let's talk about email software. It was mentioned that people needed a good alternative to Outlook. What say you, Matthew?
Well, I use Thunderbird a lot, and there's also that other email client. I forget the name of it now. It's the one that comes with Elementary OS. That one's not bad either.
Okay, how about you, Shadowwing? What are you using for email?
Thunderbird mostly, but I have tried Mutt and a few other terminal-based. I don't remember the name of a certain terminal-based one, but that seemed to work better than Thunderbird when it comes to Post Office Protocol. But Thunderbird is my primary go-to software.
Okay, and how about you, Linux Book Pro?
I use webmail all the time, so basically my web browser.
All right, and I have to agree with you there because I'm doing the same thing. Who needs a client when you can do everything in the web browser? How about you, Brian?
Yeah, I've pretty much transitioned over to using the web browser interface myself for email. However, as far as a drop-in replacement for Outlook, Evolution, or is that right? Evolution? Yeah, Evolution does that. Evolution does that out of the box. I believe Thunderbird can do it too, but I think you have to add a couple of plugins to Thunderbird for it to connect to an Exchange server.
So your options for Outlook are Thunderbird, Evolution Email, Sylpheed, Claws Mail is also another option, and Contact or Kmail is another option. Then they have a bunch of other ones listed here that I've never even heard of, so good one. All right, and this one is Matthew's absolute favorite. What are you using in place of iTunes?
Well, it kind of depends on the distro. If it's Ubuntu, I'm using Rhythmbox. If it's just about anything else, I'm using Banshee. It just has a good flow to it, low on resources, and it's stable. So it's it's my go-to choice.
How about you, Shadowwing?
Audacious. I usually use that, but it doesn't really have that much of a media library. I've been trying to figure out how to use the media player protocol or whatever it's a terminal-based media player. I've been trying to figure that out to test it, but I usually go to the other software I mentioned.
Okay, how about you, Linux Book Pro?
Clementine mainly.
Good one. Brian?
XBMC for all of my media.
All right, good stuff. And you know what I use, kids? Player, which is a fork of SM Player. It's going to be coming out in the next release of the Manjaro Cup of Linux edition, so you guys can try it out. I think it's a great media player, but you know what? I don't really need a software that's going to organize my, music collection. I use my file manager to organize my music, and I have my playlists and that sort of thing. But some options that are available to you is Clementine, that was mentioned. Rhythmbox is another good media manager, Amarok, and Banshee. Then there's also Exhale, which is also another one, and a program called A-Tunes. I don't know if you guys heard of this, and this sounds like this would be a good option because it is available for Mac, Windows, and Linux. A-Tunes is a full-featured audio player and manager developed in Java programming language, so it can be executed on different platforms. And it also is a skinnable Java alternative. Have you ever heard of that, Matthew? Because I know you were having difficulty syncing to iTunes, I believe, or was it something else you were having a problem with syncing?
No, it was iTunes, and no, I have not heard about A-Tunes. That's a new one for me.
All right, yeah, you might want to check out alternative2.net and check out A-Tunes, and you'll have to get back to us on that and let us know. Maybe even put up a video to educate people if you're able to get your device to sync with Linux using that software. Okay, and then our last one on the list is Netflix. Now, A lot of people, well, now we've got Pipelight and that sort of thing, so people can view Netflix. But that seems to be a big grievance for people. Do you do Netflix, Matthew?
No, I do not. I have played around with Pipelight just to see if I could get it to work, but I don't actually have a Netflix account.
All right, how about you, Shadow Wing?
Oh, I do all my Netflixing on my Xbox.
Linux Book.
Yeah, I did install it in Wine.
How about you, Brian?
Yeah, I do all my Netflixing on my Blu-ray player.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We do have plugins now in Linux, Pipelight, and then the Netflix desk. I can't talk today. We have the Netflix desktop, which will allow you to view Netflix. But the good news is, I think they're switching over to DRM HTML5. Yeah, I know some of you are booing in the background there, but at least with HTML5, they're hoping to eventually be able to have that. But an alternative to this is you could go to Hulu and watch videos there. Or there is a program called Popcorn Time, which you can download, and there is a markup of that on, I believe it's either on OMG Ubuntu or it is on Web Update. One of those two sites, they have a markup on the front page there where you can add the PPA and install it. I haven't checked to see if it is in the AUR, though. Well, gang, we've run out of time. So let's move on to our final thoughts. And my question to the panel is, in your experience, do you feel that free and open source software is better? Do you prefer proprietary software? Or do you just use whatever works to get the job done? And briefly explain why. We'll start with you, Matthew.
Well, I tend to use whatever works to get the job done. But with a lot of the open source alternatives, there's a lot of flexibility. And you'll see these things being ported over to different platforms. And that was one thing that I did want to add for anybody that is considering coming over to Linux and they want to know if this alternative software will work for them. The majority of the software programs that we mentioned here today, there are Windows versions of that software. So you can install that stuff, try it out, see if it'll get the job done for you before you even switch. But yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes proprietary software is appropriate because there are some things that open source software just can't do in a professional environment. But I think for the average user, open source software is just fine for the average task that you might want to do.
What's your opinion, Shadow Wing?
Well, I try to use open source software as much as possible, but with my college work, I am required to use Windows for certain things. Like for my lab sims in certain classes, it requires Windows to work properly.
Linux Book Pro.
I try to use free and open source software whenever possible, and if I can't, I look for a way to convert the file formats in a way that it would work.
How about you, Brian?
Yeah, I'm kind of like Matthew. I'm a whatever works kind of guy with more of a preference for free and open source software. But I'll just bring up this one thing. The only thing that I have not been able to find a free and open source replacement for, we just went through it a month ago, tax season, and I have not been able to find an adequate free and open source replacement for the tax preparation software I use. But that's a once a year thing, so the Windows programs that are available, I just probably need to figure out how to get those working in Wine. So
that would
there
be my...
is TurboTax online for that.
Yeah, you could use the online service, or as you said, trying to use it in Wine, but try alternative2.net and see if you can find an alternative there. My final thought on this is, hey, I use what works. I paid good money for my old outdated software, which still functions, and Linux makes it possible for me to extend the life of my programs, as I illustrated earlier. The community has created wonderful alternatives to Windows and OS X. I even spun my own distribution, shared it with the community so other people can experience Linux the same way I do, and that is something I could never do with proprietary software. Even Matthew on our panel has done the same thing. Now, there are several free packages I've tried out there, which, let's face it, guys, not all free software is good. I mean, there have been some packages I tried out there that were garbage. But what I could consider to be trash could be someone else's treasure. On the other hand, I found free programs which exceeded my expectations and, in my opinion, perform better than proprietary applications. And a good example of this would be the Melt framework for rendering video, and it seems to do it for me 5 times faster in Linux than when I was trying to render videos in Windows using Sony Vegas or Adobe Premiere. So at the end of the day, experimentation is key. If there is software you do not like, there are several alternatives available. And if you're really geeky, you can change the code, make it better, and then share it. Sharing is a good thing. Sharing is a friendly thing. Kids who share their toys have more friends playing in their sandbox, unlike proprietary software companies who want to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze every little nickel and dime out of you and restrict you with their foolish end-user license agreements. Sharing knowledge is even better because when we freely share what we have learned, everyone benefits. I would like to thank everyone listening to us live on Mumble and everyone watching us on YouTube. If you have any comments you would like to share, please click the link in the description and share your thoughts on cupoflinux.com. That is where all of the fun here at Cup of Linux is happening. Thanks to all of our guests who appear on the panel: Brian, Linux Book Pro, Lord Shadowwing, Matthew Moore. Thank you for being here. Next Saturday at 6 p.m. New York time, UTC -5, the Linux Distro Community and cupoflinux.com presents the Linux Zoo Crew, and the topic of discussion will be repurposing old software. Additional details are on the events page at linuxdistrocommunity.com or on the Cup of Linux forum. Well, that's all we have for now. As a reminder, please consider supporting the show hosts who bring you the content you enjoy the most by disabling your ad blockers or shouting some spare coin. Peace out.